You're listening to the Chopped Podcast, episode number 147. Hey everyone, I'm Marley of the blog Namely Marley. I am your host, and this is the Chopped Podcast. You know, this is the podcast designed for people just like you, bloggers who love food. Every week, my goal is to share with you thoughts, stories, interviews, everything related to food blogging so we can all learn together about what works with food blogging and maybe even a little bit about what doesn't. Today is one of those thoughts episodes. In fact, I talked to you about this last week that I was going to be doing a book review today. And in fact, that's what we're going to be talking about. It's the book called The Big Leap, and it's by Hendricks. Now, first, I want to talk a little bit about leaping because, I used to love the quote from Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, and the quote that she had kind of in the margins along the side of the actual text of the book was, "Leap and the net will appear." I love this quote, and it actually kind of invigorated me through my graduate school years because, for me, that was a big leap. I was a single mother at the time. And in fact, it seems kind of crazy to think about moving away from everybody you know. Although in hindsight, I realized it was actually the perfect thing for me to do. I moved 2 hours away with my daughter, who was about 3 at the time. And it was a great kind of, I don't know if escape is the right word. I'd always wanted a master's degree, and I'd always wanted to go to Mizzou, which is a big college here in Missouri. And I have family who have gone there as well. And it just, it really meant a lot to me, and it was a dream kind of. And so I guess probably to be following a dream and also to, be furthering my education. I didn't really have the money to be doing it. It was really scary for me actually at the time. But at the same time, it was perfect because I met new friends. It was a great experience for Addie because, one of my goals as a parent was to expose her to people from different countries and nationalities. I mean, because we live in Missouri and we even live in a suburb. And so I felt like, her experiences would be pretty monolithic if I didn't purposefully try to expose her to different kinds of people. And so she got to go to a daycare where there were kids from all over the world. And so that was a really great experience for her. So anyway, there was a lot of good that came out of it. In fact, once I got back, I was actually able to get jobs with that master's degree that helped pay for the debt that I took on as a college student. So it all worked out perfectly. It was a great experience. So for me, that quote, "Leap and the net will appear," was so true, and it worked out so well. But I can also see, there might be situations where that's not the case. It just happened to work out really well for me. And I felt like that quote was a part of inspiring me to do that. So I was really intrigued when I saw the book by Hendricks, The Big Leap. And in fact, for me, going to graduate school was a big leap, right? But I have found personally the leap into working for myself is actually even a bigger leap than that. I know that may sound crazy, but for some reason, I am able to do work for other people with so much gusto and so much, I don't know, I can create these plans and make things happen. And I'm really just full of enthusiasm for things like that. It kind of reminds me of, I think I told you last week that we were moving my mom to an independent living house, and we did that. And so I found myself over there a lot, just, keeping it clean, keeping things, I just want things to be perfect for her. I don't know why. I just have this kind of a passion for her. I guess I want her to like it there so much. And I know it's a big change for her, and she's a little uncertain about it. And so for me, the antidote is to keep her place spotless. And I noticed this kind of enthusiasm I have for cleaning at her house. And, I bring myself back home and it's like, I'll do the dishes tomorrow or things like that. So I think it's easy to have that same kind of thing for me with work. Like I can work with enthusiasm for other people. And the trick is to maintaining that kind of enthusiasm when I'm the one calling the shots, when I'm the one that's saying, hey, I want to do this post this week. And it's all me. I'm making it all up. I don't know if you feel that same way too. I think I've heard other people who say they feel that as well. You have to create some kind of your own gusto about it all. That's one of the reasons I really enjoyed this book. So I'm in a mastermind group. It's all put on by Casey Benedict. She's been on the podcast before, and she is with the site Kitchen Play, and she has several mastermind groups, and I'm in one of those. And she kept talking about this book, The Big Leap, and I kept thinking, I didn't know if I was interested in it or not. I signed up to get it at the library, and then I don't know what happened, but I ended up actually purchasing the book, and I'm really glad that I did that because I have underlined so many sections and so many great quotes and so many, just I don't know, sections of the book that just moved me. And now I'm able to go back and just kind of look for those underlined areas and get right back in that moment when I first read it. And I just, really appreciate this book. I also want to point out that another reason I found this book to be something I decided I wanted to buy is because we actually have another book by Gay Hendricks. It's called Conscious Loving. Sean, when I first met him, he recommended this book. It's one that he has read before and has recommended to other couples. And so I thought, well, hey, my husband is recommending this book. I think I'll read it. And it's on relationships. And it's a very good book, very well thought out. And I would just say it's full of integrity between creating integrity between couples. And I love this idea. I love this, idea of honesty and trust and friendship and love and passion and all those things that Gay mentions in this book. So that's why I had a pretty good idea that his book on taking the big leap would be a good book. So anyway, I thought I would share with you my big takeaways, my big, concepts that are presented in this book, The Big Leap. These are things that really stuck out to me. There's obviously a lot more to this book than I'm sharing here. And anyway, I just thought I would share with you some of the big takeaways I have. 1, mindset matters. I know I talked about this before back on episode number 123. I'm a big proponent of mindset. That said, I think mindset is something that has to be dealt with almost on a daily basis because we're dealing with programming that has been around, in our brains from the early days of our lives. From the little kid that teased you on the playground to a teacher who might have said something like, you're not a very good artist, or something like that, that's just constantly playing in your mind. And so we have to deal with mindset a lot. Particularly as entrepreneurs, I like to say that entrepreneurism is the modern day voyage to self-discovery. And I feel like there's a lot of truth to that. I'd like to point out that it wasn't that long ago that the idea that thoughts impacting your life seemed kind of woo-woo. Do you agree with me on that? Change your thoughts, change your life. And you'd hear that and you kind of roll your eyes like, whatever. But in fact, today we know that thoughts of anger, resentment, and guilt, shame, unworthiness, those kinds of thoughts, they weaken us. Whereas thoughts of peace, love, and hope, these all strengthen us. So Gay asks this question, are you willing to feel good and have your life go well all at the same time? And he uses an analogy to make his point, and I really like this. Scientists in the early days of the steam engine used to believe that they had to cap the speed of the vehicle to 30 miles an hour because they felt like going faster than that, a human body would explode. I know we laugh to think about that now, but at the time that was the mindset. And so they capped it at 30 miles, not going faster than 30 miles per hour. Some brave individual tested that, and we are all obviously going way faster than that and not exploding. So Gay uses that as an example to show how we may have some self-limiting thoughts that are holding us back. And are you willing to let your life go well for you and move past that? I know it sounds like a crazy question to be asking yourself. Well, you might think, well, of course. But if you really, think honestly about that and think about the ways that you might be holding yourself back. I mean, I can use myself as an example that I may have this belief that I really can't do this. And so that's the point that, you really have to kind of go underneath it all. And I love that he points out how, we could be talking about building colonies on Mars, and that seems like a real radical thought. But Gay points out that actually going inside and really discovering who we are as individuals can be quite radical as well. Okay, my second point is it's important to deal with fear. The Big Leap states a bit of the obvious in his book when he's pointing out that many of our fears are based on ego. Like that's something that's surprising to us because the ego is trying to protect us from being a failure. our ego doesn't want us to be a social outcast. And has been times in our lives where that's been very critical and really important. It's a fear-based reaction, fear of the unknown. These all are things that our ego is trying to protect us from. So Gay talks about something I've heard several times, but it still bears repeating, and I really liked it. Fear is excitement without the breath. So if you think about it, fear and excitement share very similar physiological responses. Your heart rate may increase, you may start sweating a little bit, and believe it or not, you actually start breathing in a shallow way. He says that you can transform your fear into excitement just by breathing fully into it. And I've actually tried this several times myself, whether it's on the tennis courts or whether it's, I'm giving a presentation and I'm really nervous about it. Taking a deep breath really does help. And in fact, I actually realize that if I have any anxiety that's going on during the day, and it could just be some little thought that's in the back of my mind that I'm not actually paying a lot of attention to, I'll recognize that I'm breathing shallow, and taking some deep breaths throughout the day is really a big helpful thing. I'm sure you've seen some of the studies that even breathing, meditation, focusing on your breath can help, believe it or not, with illnesses like depression and anxiety and things like that. Zones. Okay, so number 3 would be zones. You've probably heard about people talking about working in the zone, right? You got to get in the zone. Well, this book takes zones to another level in that he breaks it down and points out that there are some zones that you don't want to be working in. So he breaks it down to several zones. One of them is called the zone of incompetence. These are activities that we're not really good at. Others can do them better. However, we waste time here and kind of push ourselves to sit in this zone. And for me, at least, I would put some social media in that category. It's something that I can do, but I'm sure other people can do it better. In fact, I have a great example of this in that I hired a virtual assistant to do my Facebook, and I think she does a way better job than I ever did. I think I overthink it. I have a tendency to overthink it. I'm for sure about that. And she would just put these great things out there, and sometimes even kind of provocative things. And I loved it. And on my Facebook page, it definitely got some great response from my audience. It was very on topic. It was perfect. So to me, that's a kind of an example. His point is you don't want to be spending time in your zone of incompetence. That just is a no-brainer, right? The next zone is zone of competence. This is areas where we are kind of decent at it, but others can do them just as well. And the problem is we can spend a lot of time here. And I think it kind of creates a feeling of accomplishment too. So, an example might be, here's another example where I hired a VA. Earlier this year, we received a word from Casey Marquis that our recipe plugin was outdated. Well, the problem was our particular recipe plugin could not do a dump into the new recipe plugin. That's what we would have loved. It would be like one big dump and then just, it would all be there. That didn't happen because our recipe plugin was outdated. So we had to actually go in manually and transform all these recipes that we have on the site. That was a lot of work. And that's an area where I could just see myself. I envision myself spending, Sean was going to be out of town visiting his parents for the week. I could spend that whole week just doing that. I could probably sit down and watch, some episodes of Jane the Virgin or whatever, and just, cut and paste and get it all done. That's my mentality. I like to get her done. But I just imagined I could have been spending that time writing because I have a novel I'm working on, or creating a course, or doing some things that I'm better at. But there's this side of me that's just like to cross things off the list and get things done, and I feel like I can do things really fast. But I pushed past that, and I hired a virtual assistant to help me with this process of of getting these recipes transferred over. And I did create a spreadsheet, and I did do some because I wanted to, first of all, be able to tell the assistant how to do it. And I also wanted to time myself to see, how long did I expect this to take? So I'd have kind of an idea of how much time the VA should be spending on it, and also just, what my budget was going to be like to get this done. And so I did create a spreadsheet where I could track, and I put all the links in the spreadsheet. So we could, between the two of us, we could kind of track what percent was done. So I kind of did some things like that, but I felt like it was a zone of competence for me where I could have spent all this time going through all that. And instead I hired a virtual assistant. So I feel like that's kind of an example where zone of competence is an area where you definitely don't want to spend very much time because you feel like you get this sense of accomplishment, but it's not the right kind of accomplishment. Okay, the next zone is zone of excellence. Here's where these are things that you do extremely well. In fact, a lot of people can kind of get stuck here because you can make a good living here. Gay points out the problem is this can be kind of a seductive area because you are doing well and people have this expectation of you. You're reliable. You do a good job. I think a lot of us could look at this as where we were at in our corporate world. I was pretty good at the things that I did in the corporate world, and I actually enjoyed it. It was challenging. I got paid well. I enjoyed that part. I enjoyed the benefits. But it was, eating away at me because there were all these things that, it was kind of a toxic work environment. And that was not something I had control over because we had a terrible CEO who he loved creating turmoil within the office, and there wasn't anything I could do to fix that. And it was there was just all this stress going on. But anyway, I was definitely in love with the zone of excellence that I was in working there. And in fact, if the boss would have been better, I might have enjoyed working there even longer. So in that respect, I have to actually say a little bit of thanks to him because it did help push me out. It's nice to be able to think of that in hindsight because at the time I didn't feel that way. Anyway, once we can move past that zone of excellence, then Gay points out that the next zone is where we really want to spend our time, which is the zone of genius. This is the set of activities you are uniquely suited to do. You have special gifts and strengths here. Gay says there is this call to genius, and it may be loud at times, and it may come in the form of actually physical illnesses such as depression or illness or relationship conflict. And your call to genius can be also quiet too. It may be something that's just kind of going on in the background and you can easily ignore it over time, but it's still there, it's still present, and it still wants to be manifest in your life. So I really like this idea of these zones, and Gay goes into more about how you can know what is your zone of genius, because that, of course, was one of my big questions is like, how do I know what's zone of excellence versus zone of genius? And so there's a really good section on that. I think it's worth reading. 4, upper limit problem. I love this term. I'd never really thought about it this way before, but Gay talks about how we have what's called an upper limit problem. I can so easily identify this in my life now that I've actually heard it explained. It's kind of like tied back to your early beliefs, like as we talked before. If you have this, let's talk about weight. I love to talk about that as an example. If I have this belief that losing weight is hard, it may be like this kind of very subconscious and I don't really think about it much, and I go on this new diet and I start to lose weight and things start to feel really good. And then at some point it doesn't go well anymore, and I sabotage and I go eat a whole row of Oreos or something like that. Which, by the way, is something I used to do. I don't do that anymore, thank goodness. It's like I've traded that in for peanut butter. Now I can eat a whole tub of peanut butter. No, I don't eat the whole tub, but I want to. Anyway, so the whole point here is that, I may be on this great program and I'm losing this weight, and then boom, I go eat a whole tub of peanut butter. And Gay points to that as an upper limit problem. It's almost like a form of self-sabotage. Because of this mindset or this subconscious belief that I have, I can't let myself be very successful because it's like he refers to it as an internal programming error. It's like if this program is running in the background on its own, and then it hits this, my life is going along, and then I hit this blip in the code that's wrong. It's like the code is going to bring me back down. Does that make sense to you? Like, I may not realize I have this mindset that's kind of running in the background. And if I get too happy, then the mindset's going to bring me back down. It's kind of crazy to think about it that way, but he calls it an upper limit problem. I'm sure you can see it in the lives of other people. It may be actually helpful to see it if you've got some obvious friend that constantly has all these problems. Then you can see that in them, living life out of integrity, and then, something stupid happens, like they lose their job or whatever. Things like that happen, and you can see it as an upper limit problem. I feel like it's helpful to describe it that way. I think he uses a term like it's an alarm system, and it will set in and keep you small and keep you from fulfilling your dreams. He goes into depth about some of the symptoms of an upper limit problem, and worry is an example of one of those. He goes into several, and I'm just going to talk briefly about worry. He says what he does is when he has worry that's setting in, he purposefully notices himself worrying, and then he chooses to let go of the worry, shifting his focus away from what he's worried about. And then he chooses to go into this place of wonder. He wonders what positive new thing is trying to come into being, and instead of the worry. And then he changes his focus to a feeling in his body where that positive new thing is trying to come through. And then he opens his focus to feeling that body feeling deeply. And then he feels that deep feeling for as long as he possibly can. And then later he comes to this realization of the idea of the positive thing that was trying to come through. If you're trying to wonder what that body feeling is that he's talking about there, I like to think of the example of when my daughter was a baby, and I imagine holding her, or remember holding her, and I remember that feeling of love, and maybe she's looking up at me and I'm looking down at her, and I see the look of love towards me, and I just feel like this feeling of love that comes over me there's almost a tingliness to it, and it just comes over my whole body. And I imagine that's kind of what he's talking about there. If you have a feeling of a positive feeling that you can have that goes throughout your whole body, not, in other words, a physiological feeling, not just an emotional feeling. I believe that's what he's talking about there. And I feel like that's the kind of thing that if you can hold on to that as long as you can during your day, it really can change your mindset from one of worry to one of a positive and productive day for yourself. Okay. He also talks about integrity. He talks about having integrity in your life, and I feel like I'm a person of integrity. However, I do know there's some areas where I can improve. I mean, for example, I know this about myself, that I have a tendency to commit to social events and then back out. I think for me, what happens is I commit to something that's like a month away, and at the time it seems like such a great thing, and then as now it's the day of the event, and I have 1,000 other things that are happening, and I have a tendency to be kind of a homebody, and if I have 1,000 other things going on at the same time, it's just sometimes social events don't seem that exciting to me, and so I have a tendency to back out. But Gay says that integrity is a physics issue. It's if we look at it as physics rather than a moral issue, it helps us kind of understand it better. He says integrity originally had to do with wholeness and completeness. To be in integrity meant that you were whole and complete, and to be out of integrity meant a breach in your wholeness. So morality is about good and bad and right and wrong, and that can kind of make us feel shameful, which is kind of a different thing to be looking at. So he suggests to think of communication between people as like a flow of energy. So think of your communication with your own inner depths in that very same way. When you're not in integrity, it's like a breach, and it stops that flow of energy. So by being committed to living in integrity with yourself and with others, you're keeping that flow, that energy flow going. So for me, I know that I'm going to try to be a little bit more careful about what things I say yes to, And then when I have said yes, I will, make every effort to go, even if I could probably create some guidelines around that. Like the day of the event, I may feel like I don't want to go, but I could say to myself, you know what? You told this person you're going to go, so show up and even just stay for 30 minutes. And that gives me a feeling of, okay, I can feel like I'm living in integrity by going ahead and attending this event, but I don't have to, stay there for hours. Number 6, be curious. Have a curious attitude about the things that are going on in your life. For example, if you're noticing an upper limit problem, or if you're noticing an area where you're living out of integrity, don't have an attitude of blame. Oh, like, God, you're so stupid. Why do you keep doing this over and over? That kind of thing. Instead, have an attitude of curiosity. Like, I wonder why it is that I have a tendency to not want to go to social events. I know that I live in that area between extrovert and introvert. I'm right in the middle. And so it could just be the introverted me that's peeking its head out and saying, I just want a night at home. I want to be, not bothered tonight. But I also know this extrovert in me really enjoys being around other people. And so I could have a spirit of wonder about that rather than judgment. And I think that helps you be playful about it rather than kind of punitive, rather than pushing myself to go to this event. Be playful and say, well, I wonder if I could just go and meet one new person, or to find some way to be curious rather than having an attitude of blame. I know that it's one thing I actually hated about my corporate world, is that there's oftentimes an attitude of blame that goes on, and that is never a healthy environment. And so if it's not healthy for a corporate world, it's not healthy for yourself as well. So try to avoid living in this area of blame. So the next point is commitment. In fact, Gay talks about it's important to make a commitment to your zone of genius, that the more you make a commitment, the more it brings forth the means necessary for you to live there. I don't know, it sounds kind of exciting and tingly and scary at the same time. So he says, if you make a powerful, sincere commitment, your journey will be blessed with uncommon good fortune at all the twists and turns of the road. He says commitment has that kind of power. He recommends saying these words and saying them with feeling. I commit to living in my zone of genius now and forever. Do you feel kind of tingly to saying that? I think it's kind of exciting. I love the idea of it because I want to be working in my zone of genius just as much as possible. And I imagine you feel the same way. So I want to point out that he goes into more about how you understand what your zone of genius is. And he says one way to do that is to make room in your awareness for abundance, love, and success. And that's kind of a way that you can just naturally flow into your zone of genius. But he also has other tips in the book too. So finally, there's a new mantra that I've adopted as a result of this book. Here it is. Are you ready? I expand in abundance, success, and love every day as I inspire those around me to do the same. I think I've told you before that I had a mantra that I've been saying lately, which is I receive all the good the universe has to offer me. And I love that one because I believe it helps me stay focused on the good that is arriving in my life every day, because it's so easy to focus on the negative, don't you think? It's so easy to say, oh, this project didn't work out for me, or, this person has more traffic, or I'm just not good enough at this. And those negative things are just going to be there every single day, and they can easily take up our time and our focus. But for me to say those words, I receive all the good that life has to offer me, or the universe has to offer me, to me was a way of focusing on the good that I have. So, I could list the good as this wonderful relationship I have with Sean and Addie. I have, a home. I have a bed I can sleep in every night. I have clean water, and then I can also go beyond that and say, we are in the process of living the dream. We do food photography together. We are doing these projects. I love this podcast where I get to talk with you. There's so many positives in my life. And so I feel like that mantra really helped me to stay focused on that one. But now this new one that I've been focusing on as well, I feel like kind of takes it to the next level. I expand in abundance, success, and love every day as I inspire those around me to do the same. I love this term abundance too. And I just feel like the more that we can kind of own those for ourselves, the better we feel about it. So abundance, success, and love every day. I mean, even if all we did was expand and love every day, I think we would be well on the way to feeling more happy and successful in the work that we're doing. So I just feel like there's so much more to this book that I would love to share with you. But, here we are, so many minutes into this podcast episode, and I was hoping to keep this one brief for you all. So I just wanted to share with you those key concepts from the book that I found so inspiring. I have so many sections of the book underlined, and I imagine that you will too if you decide to get it and read it for yourself. Like I say, it is available at the library as well. In fact, my library has it both in electronic and where I can read it on my iPad, or it also has it where you can just get a copy of the book yourself. But I ordered it on Amazon, and I think it's like $10, maybe even a little bit less. And I enjoyed the fact that I could underline and really highlight the things that really meant a lot to me. I highly recommend this book to anyone embarking on a path toward working in their zone of genius. And I hope that's you. Okay, that's it for today's show. Thanks for joining me today. Next week, we'll have another exciting interview coming your way. This one with an expert in the field of branding. Thank you for your support of the Chop Podcast. If you're receiving value from this show, you can help support the podcast in several ways. 1, leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher. It makes a big difference. 2, share about it on social media with your friends and family. 3, now you can even support the show financially by leaving a contribution at Patreon. Go to patreon.com/Chop Podcast. You inspire me, and I hope today's show was helpful and inspirational to you as well. Now go forth and be your best you.